is Bob back with BBD and Geopolitical Views. Expanding on yesterday, that was Pakistan, and now we're going from Pakistan to Afghanistan, Afghanistan to Iran and the Middle East. The important part to note here, right? Pakistan, also like India, is not going to be used, this opportunity that's been provided to it by the withdrawal of the United States from Afghanistan. In fact, it seems like it's going to, with the kind of turbulence that's now happening in their northwest frontier, it's going to be far worse for them than it is going to be for us. However, let's see what we have in the news. Small news. Pakistan PM expresses solidarity with India over COVID crisis. Sincere, okay. What you got to see here, what Shiv Shankar Menon has to write. China's rising support for Pakistan and their collusion may affect our interests. Former National Security Advisor and author of the new book, Choices Inside the Making of Indian Foreign Policy, tells Indrani Bagchi that China has made it clear that it doesn't see India's rise as being in its interest. So it will do everything, folks, to make sure that doesn't happen. India, on the other hand, is now getting locked out of the world, which is kind of a shame, because we're going to reach a point of time, because these mutating strains are so bad that the rest of the world is now beginning to get up and say, hey, unless you're vaccinated, your vaccine proves that it makes you immune and not spreadable, only then we'll allow you in. So now with the latest one to join, Kuwait and Iran. Whoa. How Pakistan plays this, I always wonder. Sri Lanka police arrest Muslim member of parliament over links to 2019 attack. Now that, interesting. It kind of, Pakistan is always in a really complicated and duplicitous position, because of, on one side it tries to keep castigating India about our treatment of our Muslims, but then it partners everybody else who kind of is also doing the same thing. China with the Uyghurs, Sri Lanka. Then you also have within themselves all the Muslims getting beaten up, right? And then this is interesting. I told you, we were treading pretty close to this. Was being made out to be a Nimitz, USS Nimitz movement in 1971 when Nixon sent in that fleet to support the Pakistan genocide in Bangladesh, right? That this is what's going to happen, and it may end up rupturing relationships between India and the United States. At the end of the day, though, folks, it is India's fault. We were sitting on the biggest asset production capacities. We needed to have pumped in, calculated what we need to supply to the world. We should have calculated and said this is what we need for India, gambled and expanded capacity in August. We did. Now it's the PL148 movement, or is it the PL48 movement? We're out with a begging bowl. And when the begging bowl is not getting filled, we are complaining, and this is not actually good for our image. However, the US also should realize that this is a moment for them finally to flip India. And they should be out there if they want the Quad to work. And because this is what Seema Sarohi writes. Biden's America isn't back, it has turned its back. US President's refusal to share vaccine with India, others is heartless and thoughtless. And this is what's happening, and what Chintanand Rajagata, both of them writing from the United States, anti-US sentiment explodes as Biden remains cold to India's COVID needs. Clamor grows against Americans' first vax policy. Folks, or last person, I can expect every other country to complain, because neither do they have the capacity, nor do they have the money, nor are they in the top 10 growing economies as we continue to claim. But India should not be taking the stand. To be here is just so stupid at this stage. It really has left our foreign policy in tatters, just because our domestic policy ran into hubris because of the God complex. I know it all complex, right? Something positive out of ASEAN for the Myanmar. ASEAN nations demand immediate cessation of violence in Myanmar. About time somebody else carried this on its shoulder. ASEAN has stepped in. What they can do, one doesn't know. But as somebody said rightly, India currently doesn't have the capacity to deal with the COVID, Afghanistan and Myanmar at the same time. Welcome back, folks. Now, let's get to the hot topic, that's Afghanistan. And here, I want to read out, Afghanistan is in flux, though now I see Pakistan being more of a risk to India than Afghanistan. But this is something that everybody should hear and understand, is something very, very well written by Avinash Paliwal. In Kabul, the Republic versus the Emirate. And here what he says is, a political solution isn't easy. Kabul's failure to overcome factionalism underlines the political vacuousness of the Islamic Republic despite its constitutional existence. Okay. For India, which has borne the brunt of instability in Afghanistan in the past, this is highly undesirable situation. Since 2001, New Delhi relied on the US security presence to expand its strategic footprint in Afghanistan and shore up ties with sitting president in Kabul, while refusing to engage with Taliban and advocating an impossible Afghan-led, Afghan-owned government. Right? India, which is unfortunately facing a similar prospect of state collapse in Myanmar, doesn't have the capacity to resolve Afghanistan's deep-rooted problems. But in the next 4 months, before the last American soldier departs, it must make certain adjustments to prevent serious harm. That is true, but Pakistan may just end up playing ball with that, helping us out. India must appoint a special envoy to strengthen ties with allies within Republican Afghanistan and increase, this is what is always the important part, military, especially aerial combat support for Kabul. The envoy should then be mandated to open channels with select Taliban figures. India has not invested much diplomatic capital on this front, but cannot afford to remain aloof from Taliban anymore, especially, remember, aerial help, which means joining with the United States. And remember, Taliban is not a monolith, right? Tactical in nature, the aim of such outreach should be twofold. One, to gauge the Taliban's intent and capability to exercise policy autonomy vis-a-vis Pakistan. Two, to explore and, if possible, exploit fissures within Taliban. Okay. To be sure, India is likely to coordinate its Afghanistan policy with the US in the coming years as part of Quad, but given the situation on the ground, Tehran will be a critical regional ally for New Delhi. At the Raisina dialogue, Iran Foreign Minister Javed Zarif, in a discussion with his Indian counterpart Jaishankar and Afghanistan's National Security Advisor Hamdullah Mohib, stated clearly that Tehran does not desire an emirate Afghanistan. Despite its alignment with China and Russia, and despite recent strains in bilateral ties, Tehran is likely to cooperate with the New Delhi on this issue. True that. Afghanistan today is more resilient than this is the other important part that everybody should know. Afghanistan today is more resilient than its early 1990 avatar and is likely to offer stiff, localized resistance to Taliban, and India can play an important role. Northern Alliance. Afghan resistance against the Taliban, coupled with the endurance of nationalist Afghan opinion, which cuts across the Republic and Emirate spectrum, affords India geopolitical maneuvering space, unlike some people who said we didn't have. If New Delhi plays its cards right, it can both protect its interests in Afghanistan and support Kabul to stand its ground, however tenuous vis-a-vis Pakistan. Important. And while we're doing this, just remember what the Americans are doing. While they're pulling up, here's what said. Battle for Afghanistan, Doyle McManus. And the United States will continue to have important stakes in the outcome even if our troops are no longer there, he says. American intelligence agencies will continue to pay Afghan informants for years to come. If Al-Qaeda appears to be regrouping there, American drones will attack it. US forces will establish bases in nearby countries from which to conduct those strikes. And covert military units may even drop back into Afghanistan if a president deems it necessary. Just as US Navy SEALs landed on Pakistan to kill Osama bin Laden in 2011. This is the important point. US will stay there. And see what Raja Mohan writes. The great Afghan microcosm. It says, the impeding withdrawal of all American soldiers will not diminish the importance of Afghanistan as a geopolitical microcosm. As in the last 5 decades, Afghanistan will continue to showcase the main international trends. Ending US military involvement, however, does not necessarily make Washington marginal to the future evolution of Afghanistan. the US remains the most significant global power even after the end of the unipolar moment. Its ability to weigh in on multiple issues is considerable. I have to remember that, right? The US will figure prominently in any Taliban strategy to win international diplomatic recognition and political legitimacy. It will also need Western economic assistance for stabilizing the war-torn economy. Yet China is also widely seen as the biggest beneficiary of US withdrawal. Could China succeed Russia and the US is the most important external partner? I personally don't think so. The reason why I say this is China's potential contribution to Afghan's geopolitics is complicated by Beijing's lack of experience in navigating the treacherous terrains of Southwest Asian politics. And also the other thing is, China is also vulnerable to the extremist politics of the region that fan the flames of religious and ethnic separatism in China's Muslim-majority Xinjiang province. And this is going to be their Achilles heel if they throw their hand in, right? He says, though the last 4 decades and more, Afghanistan has been the incubator of Islamic radicalism and a laboratory for its weaponization for geopolitical ends. In the 80s, the US sponsored the Afghan jihad against the godless Soviet Union. Since then, the Islamic radicals have directed the jihad against the West. To make matters little more complicated, some of the religious extremists driven by sectarianism that rival Muslim powers leverage against each other. This is important, right? Tehran is bound to play a decisive part in Afghanistan, and that is true. The focus on external powers should not give the impression that the local actors in Afghanistan are mere pawns. That this is the important part, right? Important. The opposite is true. They have agency of their own. All of them know how to manipulate external powers for their own ends in Afghanistan. China, beware. As the contradiction at 3 levels, international, regional, local, intersect with each other, the new Afghan picture will be painted in multiple shades of grey. Several contentions unfolding around Afghanistan promise to reorder the region again. Delhi needs much strategic activism to secure its interests and promote regional stability in this flux. Discarding old hesitations and building new geopolitical coalitions will be critical for a successful Indian engagement with the Afghan microcosm. We have space, folks. We need guts, we need glory, and we need foresight. That, unfortunately, is not there as I see it. Welcome back, folks. So the other big player, obviously, for Afghanistan is around China and Russia. Russia is in it, as I'll tell you later, is just in it for showing the finger to the United States, is Iran. Iran has complicated relationship with both Afghanistan and Pakistan, right? Because of the Shia-Sunni combustible relationship. And you already have, like I said, Barelvi and Wahhabi Islam in Pakistan. Even Barelvi is not turned extremist, as you saw with what is happening in the recent Baruha in Pakistan. There's bound to be a Shia-Sunni explosion in Pakistan. That puts Iran in a very difficult situation, as a result of which Iran needs India a lot more. Then obviously there is a lot of stuff happening in the Middle East, where you have a situation where Saudis and Israel supported by Trump wanted to isolate Iran, but now Biden is trying to bring Iran in. So in this latest Raisana dialogue, it came out pretty clear that this is one place India and Iran can jive. So where do we have that? Iran comes out and says Iran warns against efforts to destabilize ties with India. But then they did their bit to try and make sure that happened, because Mossad team joins NIA and embassy blast probe, IED blast in high security zone near Israel embassy, and this was most likely by they're saying by Iran. Then you have Tehran tests Biden with rocket attack on airbase. Within Iran, things are not that good. Protests grow in restive Iran province. Then you have their tour were done quickly. US should revive the Iran deals to halt slump, and that is important. And US-Iran hope to salvage nuclear deal in Vienna. Why it's critical, Iran, is because Iran has a much bigger impact. Because what do you see here? Iraqi militias frustrate US hopes. And here, Biden's airstrike on pro-Iran fighters come amid moves to woo Tehran over nuclear. So it's complex situation because of Iraq, Iran, Saudi Arabia and Iran. Iran needs India to counter in Afghanistan, folks. We should remember that. Jai Hind.